Great. All right, bang on midday. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emily. I'm part of the Ventures team, and welcome to a very special Ventures Fireside Chat. So this is in collaboration with the Student Employability Centre's Student Success Program. So today we get to chat with entrepreneurial champions working in startups, scale-ups, and social enterprise. I'd like to start with the acknowledgement of country. As many of you are participating from Brisbane, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which UQ operates and pay respects to their ancestors and descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. Today's Fireside Chat will feature a panel of some of Brisbane's most successful entrepreneurs discussing some of the challenges, obstacles, and success they've had working in the entrepreneurial space. New technologies and business models are transforming the way we live and work. They need to be agile and innovative. The need to be agile and innovative has never been more important. Whether you work in corporate, government, or want to start your own business, entrepreneurial skills are in high demand. So let me introduce our three panelists. Juliette Wright is the founder and CEO of GiveIt. She is an experienced director and chief executive officer with a demonstrated history of working in the nonprofit sector. In 2019, she received the Medal in the Order of Australia for service to the community through charitable initiatives. Juliette is a strong business development professional and graduated from Stanford Uni. Next, we have Jason Titman, and his career has been dominated by building successful companies and exiting them at strategic points in time. He has done this across technology, professional services, retail, and property verticals. Over the past 20 years, he has proved his skills across both B2B and B2C. Jason has been a key driver in companies that have created over 300+ million in value and exits for business partners, shareholders, and founders. And we also have Rachel Huang, who's the co-founder and CEO of Powersphere and an ilab accelerator graduate. Rachel is passionate about ensuring everyone has access to affordable and clean energy. Her company, Powersphere, produces omnidirectional wind turbines built from wholly renewable materials. The turbine is capable of capturing winds from every direction and generating electricity in every region of the world. Rachel is currently studying chemical engineering and biomedical sciences at UQ. So Juliette, Jason, and Rachel, welcome to UQ and our Fireside Chat.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Great. So I'll start off this Fireside Chat by asking our panelists questions, and then about 45 minutes in, I'll open it up to our virtual floor and invite the audience to ask them your questions. To ask our panelists questions, you can do so by typing the questions into the chat box, and then I can ask the questions to our panelists on your behalf. So let's start with the beginning, and I'll get each of you to respond to this first question. The word entrepreneur means a lot of different things to different people. Can you talk about what makes someone an entrepreneur? Juliette, can we hear from you?
I firstly think, and I've had a belief system since I was very young, that there is a solution to everything. And I get quite excited when I get a big problem. And my family are witness to this all the time. I get quite excited when there's a big, massive problem because I go, well, there's a solution that we haven't thought of yet. And so I think my entrepreneurial friends are risk takers and find a solution in everything. And never, ever, 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 unfortunately, exhaustingly, never, ever, ever give up. Because new ideas are hard. And it's, you know, you can get some early adopters, but, you know, you've got to get government and investors and people to come onto your idea. So it doesn't hurt if you're an entrepreneur that's a little bit of an extrovert that can actually push your idea into other people's, you know, spaces so they can actually help you on your journey.
Great, thanks Juliette. How about you, Jason?
Look, I think I probably agree with everything Juliette said. You know, I think you can be either an extrovert or an introvert to be an entrepreneur. So that's probably one comment that I would make and reinforce. The other thing is it is definitely a lot about problem solving and thinking outside the box. I think that's important for entrepreneurs. It's a real process of thinking, and that tenacity also that Juliette mentioned is really, really important, because there will be, you know, obstacles, roadblocks at every step along the way. And it's really about, an entrepreneur is about finding out how to sidestep those and how to go to the next level. And being a transformative kind of individual as well. I think, you know, entrepreneurs need to be of that mindset where they can grow and want to improve themselves, and they're usually a pretty driven individual. So I do think the term, as you said, Emily, can be quite clouded now because it's being used a lot more. Probably 10, 15 years ago, everybody was a property developer, certainly in Australia and, you know, places like Spain and the US. It's moved now to everybody's a tech founder or an entrepreneur. And I think it's sometimes used incorrectly. But yeah, look, really exciting times. You know, entrepreneurs need to also surround themselves with a whole lot of other people as well to make it come together. There's very, very few entrepreneurs, in fact, I'm not sure there's any, that have ever done it all on their own. So that's the other point I would make.
Great, thanks. Do you have anything to add to that, Rachel?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I think there are two aspects of entrepreneurship. One is the personal side, where you kind of grow your own personality and become more driven, more determined, and be able to just achieve goals. And the other side would be the wider impact to the community or the ecosystem, or even the problem you're trying to tackle, just by solving the problem and creating a solution for people. That's quite meaningful. That's a quite meaningful journey in the process of helping people and overcoming problems. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. And also, Rachel, moving on from that, have you always planned on being an entrepreneur? It would be interesting for our uni students in the audience to hear from someone who's still a student as well.
Right, yeah. Okay, well, for me, no. I came into UQ thinking I'll do chemical engineering and become a chemical engineer. That was my career pathway, until the first year of engineering kind of taught me the different ways to tackle a problem and the sustainability issues around the world. And that gave me and my co-founder an idea that we might be able to fix some problems around the world around sustainability. And the James Dyson Award, as well as the Cisco Challenge by the Dow Center, they gave us an opportunity to create and build onto our idea. And we created this wind turbine that was omnidirectional and can capture wind from every direction at the same time. That was a completely new concept at the time, and no one has ever done that. So we entered quite a few competitions with that idea, and we eventually won the Cisco Challenge and got into ilab. So it all started from this wondering whether we can create something that's meaningful and can create renewable energy. So that Powersphere basically started from us creating little prototypes in our engineering buildings and making things with wires. Now we've gone to 3D printing prototype. We've gone to molding prototypes. So it's gone a long way since we started, but I definitely didn't picture myself as an entrepreneur or even a company founder when I first got into uni. So when I started Powersphere, I was 18 years old, and I got into ilab when I was 19. Yeah, and now going through this COVID situation, many different difficulties throughout the way, I think it has certainly built my character and allowed me to learn different things and how to solve problems, how to think in an entrepreneur way. So yeah, it's not what I planned, but I don't regret anything. Yeah.
Great, that's a great story, Rachel. This next one's for you, Jason. Entrepreneurs are always breaking new ground, doing something new. It can be a tough road. Why would you encourage someone to be an entrepreneur?
That is a good question, Emily. There's certainly been periods in my career where I thought, why am I doing all of this? It would be much easier to have somebody else take all of that responsibility and pressure off me. Look, I think it comes from a couple of areas. One is it depends what sort of person you are, but we've all got passions for different areas, and I think if you want to be happy in your life and feel that you've given something back, oftentimes going down the path of being an entrepreneur is the way to do it. You're going to certainly have your detractors and you're going to have your challenges, but it's like, you know, climbing to the top of the mountain. It's like finishing the marathon. It's like, you know, playing a round of golf that you come in well under par. Whatever your thing is, you know, being an entrepreneur gives you that opportunity to just deliver and feel that you're making a change in the world, whether it be a business change or whether it be a social enterprise change. And I suppose for somebody like me, I have always enjoyed being part of the change process. And I've been part of the change process in different ways and at different levels. But really, that's what I enjoy about it. And I think the growth of you as an individual as well can really come a long way. You don't realise what you can achieve or what you are achieving until you get, you know, well into the journey. There's certainly been, you know, entrepreneurs. I know Mike Cannon-Brookes from Atlassian, that very successful Australian tech company, often talks about the imposter syndrome or the CEO imposter or founder syndrome. It is interesting when you hear Mike and you hear others, and I've, you know, had the opportunity to speak with several of them privately as well as publicly. And they often sort of say they didn't start out a bit like Rachel, you know, myself as well, didn't start out on this journey saying, hey, I'm going to become an entrepreneur and I'm going to create these companies and I'm going to do this. Oftentimes it happens, it evolves, you get caught up in it. And if it's your thing and you're enjoying it and you're adding value to those around you, you generally keep going. So like I say, it's a journey. You know, back to your real question there, Emily. It is a journey. You need to be making sure you enjoy it at each point in time, but there will be points you don't enjoy it. But it's very self-fulfilling, and I think you can feel that you've left a legacy in whatever you've done as the entrepreneur. You've left some kind of legacy for those around you, that the world's a better place.
Great, thanks, Jason. This question's for Juliette. So what are you focused on now with your own organisation? So what's the vision? What's your focus?
Well, GiveIt is now funded nationally to support over 3,500 charities. We do their donation procurement on a day-to-day basis, but our actual sustainability is coming from our fee for service, which is our emergency or disaster recovery service, where we now work in partnership with Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and the ACT government to manage all offers of goods and services in times of emergencies. So as you know, we've had a really rough year. So going out of the bushfires into COVID, you know, the challenge of actually doing donations without contact. Thank God for vouchers and online. The next phase is to complete the rollout throughout Australia and make sure that every single person in Australia has the simple items that they need to make it through the day, and to tell and share with all the people around Australia who have stuff underneath their stairs or in their cupboards that they no longer need, that those items can actually make a significant difference to someone in their local area. And once we've got that nailed, we're going to go to New Zealand. As you know, they have catastrophic natural disasters over there, and they don't have a scalable donation model, Emily. So there is a need for GiveIt over there. And honestly, I think if I don't give it there, I think it will be built and copied over there because there's such an intense need for it. But the great thing about Give It is we've just relaunched. I think this is the 6th, 7th website that we've built. And the model is matured after 12 years. We know donations are doing no harm. So the model is now available for replication across the world. And my ultimate goal with staff and funding is that you go to the Give It website, no matter where you are in the world, and then you put up in the search filter, you know, the top right, you put in honey, and then all the charities across the world that need honey will pop up, and you can go Uganda, Africa, wherever, and then your donation is not only the honey, but the transportation and the postage of that honey, or clothing, or any item that they require. And so we can truly connect the haves and the have-nots, because there's a lot of people who have too much. And I think that the excess that they have can fill the need, those urgent material needs of people doing it tough.
Great. That's good news to see it scaling up and you're making steps to get to New Zealand and other places. Great. Jason, we have a room full of budding entrepreneurs, but where do they start? How do entrepreneurs come up with ideas? So this is quite a common question that we have with our community.
And it is a good question. I think I'll answer that by saying that sometimes people can think too hard to come up with an idea. You know, sometimes you can be focusing on it and it's just not coming to you. You know, there's some sort of a block there, a brain block. So I think that happens with some people. Certainly, you know, if you're trying to start a business yourself, if you're trying to become an entrepreneur, I like to think of it a little bit as, I don't like the terminology silos, but the verticals in which you operate. There are literally hundreds and thousands of ideas that haven't even come to fruition yet that are sitting out there. And there are some that will be percolating in this conversation in this room. They're things that could be done better. What I'm trying to say is that there's ideas out there all the time that we miss. We have blind spots because it's not our space. So I think it is important as an entrepreneur to have a worldly and a wide thinking and experience. So the more exposure you can get to other countries, other cultures, different types of mediums that you read on, books, Kindles, TVs, you know, whatever. I tend to think entrepreneurs are at their best when they have ideas coming at them and exposure. So I think an idea, it's good as an entrepreneur to go and have broad exposure. Don't be too narrow with your exposure to things in life. But on the other hand, don't necessarily think that you are going to come up with a brilliant idea with something that's out of your space, that's out of your realm. The vast majority of ideas that come up and actually get somewhere are by people that operate in a particular space. Be it sort of sustainable energy, be it a social enterprise, be it an amazing piece of property tech or a piece of fintech. You know, most of the people, if you look at the backgrounds of the founders and the entrepreneurs that are starting these, they've actually had a career in that space, or they've had family experience in that space. So that's the other thing. You know, the first point, as I made to everybody, is be very open to getting ideas and information more so from a whole range. Don't be too narrow. If you only get information and mix with a certain group of people in a certain space, then you're closing your opportunity to let your idea flourish and the networks that you need. But at the same time, when you try to find that idea, be careful that you don't look too broadly. Look more towards where the spaces you are in, because you'll tend to see the opportunities. You'll see the opportunities for something in blockchain, if that's your space, and in contracts and the legal side of things. You'll see something in a sustainable energy space, or in the marine space, or you'll see something in defence if you're operating in that, or in construction. So that's probably the big picture points I would make there, Emily. Yeah. Maybe there'll be some more.
I don't know about that, Jason,
Okay,
100%. Because in the social entrepreneur space, you'll often find people who are extremely passionate about some need that's not getting met. And then they just dive whole into it, create a new idea in that space. Like, for example, I'm a nutritionist and I was the CEO of an NGO within 5-10 years because of the idea that came about because I couldn't donate baby clothes. So, you know, I think that sometimes you definitely gonna have skills, and I have skills that have made this possible. But find out what you're really passionate about. Write down what makes you angry, what spurs you, what is not getting fixed, what irritates you, what do you want to see better, and then focus in on solving that. Coming from another silo, because the people in that silo aren't doing a great job. So come on in, jump silos. So, you know, maybe engineers and are going to be the ones that, I don't know, solve a soft human social condition, or the doctors are going to be the ones that, you know, might come up with something that changes the way that we do fishing wire so that we don't hurt the fish. I don't know. Like, I think that if we can all collaborate and get out of our silos a little bit. I
definitely agree that many people within their silo are tunnel visioned and not open to new ways of doing things. So I guess to reinforce that point, absolutely, yeah. No, I do agree that oftentimes, you know, it's got to be that different way of thinking, and many people within the silo don't come up with that different way of thinking. So yeah, no, good point to add to it.
I'll also add on to that. So it's not only coming up with an idea yourself, you have people and all these resources you can reach to. So if there's something that's really inspiring you, you can go out and talk to people, and then they can help and contribute to your idea. So don't think you're on this by yourself. You can talk to people, and they're usually really helpful.
That's great. It's great to hear everyone's response to that. Thanks. And follow-up question then for you, Rachel. So having the right people around you is really important. So how do you build a solid team? So whether it's your co-founding team or others in your broader team?
Right. Okay. So first of all, I haven't had the opportunity to build a really big team and come across a lot of people like Jason and Juliette might have. But being in a startup and being the co-founder of Powersphere, I've worked with my co-founder, I worked with interns, and those might not be a lot of people, but I can say that working with people is definitely a challenge when people have different ideas and they all like to contribute on your company, and that's a great thing. But sometimes being able to finalize on your final vision and all those things might take quite a big discussion and take quite a long time to finalize. So I think for me, and being early in my startup, I think my way of doing that is just to listen to everyone and just write all the options down. For example, if we're deciding on something, just write everything down. And if we're so believing in our own view, we should just let it sit for a while and come back another time when we're both more well educated on the topic and come back to decide. So that would be my view on it, but I think Jason and Julia will definitely have more to add on that.
Thanks, Rachel. And one quick question. How did you meet your co-founder?
Well, we were working in the same engineering project team in our first year course, and we kind of built this water treatment process for our course, and that went quite far. We won the Engineering Without Borders Challenge at Melbourne, and that was a good experience knowing that what we create can actually be applied. So our water treatment system was applicable for Cambodian water treatment. They didn't have access to clear water, so that was actually that could be implemented in their country. And that was a big realization that us as engineers can create things and it can hopefully impact other people in a positive way. So I met my co-founder in our course, and then we went on into these other competitions and challenges just to dip our feet in the water and see what it's like to keep creating and keep making things. And eventually we came up with Powersphere, which went to ilab, and we decided that it's a cool device and it has a lot of potential. So then we went on to build Powersphere. So learned to do financial projections and all those things that an engineer usually doesn't need to do. Yeah, so that was all in ilab, and it was a fantastic experience.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Juliette, can you tell us a bit about your team building experiences and insights over 12 years of building Gibbet?
So, well, initially, no one thought that my idea was going to work. So even my parents and my husband and pretty much everyone in the universe. So I didn't really have a team at the beginning. I had their support in theory, but they didn't think that Gibbet was going to work. And so I actually had to do it anyway, despite the views of people around me. But then I built the model and people could understand what I was trying to do, because I think I wasn't really articulate about Gibbet like the way that I can be now. Or can be is the word there, because sometimes I can't just stuff it up. And then I got a first follower. Like I had a volunteer that came on and she said, I just love this so much. And she worked maybe 20, 25 hours a week with me. And then she was fantastic at recruiting volunteers while I was trying to recruit government. And then we had 15 to 20 volunteers. And then it got to the problem where we had to volunteer manage, So, I mean, I've done every role within Gibbet all the way up to CEO. And, managing volunteers can be really challenging. I used to call it herding cats, but that's really offensive apparently. But it's not. Like, you've got very willful, gorgeous people wanting to help you, and you've got to give them their patch, but they want to go on holidays sometimes for 2 or 3 months. So, but I think with the team building is that I've always been really careful to share with them the vision and the 1-year vision. And then they would all help me with the 3-year vision, and they're all very aware about my 20-year vision. So they bought into that and they loved that vision. And then I think that's how a team is made, that they feel part of a collective. Yeah. But it's tough, particularly now with COVID and making sure people feel connected, because it's the period of time where people feel scared, unsure, and are desperate for connection, and it's pretty hard to get it through screens. It's really we really are face-to-face creatures. There's a solution there if someone can come up with a way that we can feel more connected through these devices.
Yeah, I think there's a few teams who are working on that for the virtual hackathon. So we'll see
Right.
what comes up.
Virtual reality suits or something, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Right, next question for Jason. There are great benefits in being entrepreneurial, but not everyone wants to build their own startup. Can you talk about the value of being entrepreneurial in an existing organisation?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot more acceptance now of entrepreneurialism within organisations, and I think it's a really good thing to see. I've spent a bit of time working with Lend Lease and also the Centre Group and their boards trying to build their own internal ventures teams. And through one of my entities as well, Neato, Telstra became a major shareholder of us 5 years ago. So I've sort of seen how they have embraced it. It is a really interesting challenge for organisations. I think as individuals, it is very exciting. But what I will say is not every organisation is as open to such entrepreneurialism as I think they should be, but they're coming around to it. You're seeing here in Brisbane, for example, Suncorp has their own kind of internal team that they're trying to do for startups, getting ideas going. And that's becoming a lot more common across a lot of the larger organisations, because they are seeing that they are losing this good, young, upcoming talent. If the organisation doesn't foster and create an opportunity, these people go off and do their own thing. So they're losing a lot of that, which they could have back inside them. So I think if you're that way inclined, absolutely, going out on your own, being an entrepreneur, is not for everybody. And it depends at where you are in your life as well, your family situation, financial, etc. So many times you can be equally successful by being an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur within the organisation. I think the important thing is to try and find a sponsor, an executive sponsor or a mentor within that organisation. If that organisation just doesn't have a culture, you've got two choices. Probably you can either push through and keep trying to force it to change. Sometimes that will happen. You can be a change agent within your organisation. Other times it's probably not worth the effort, and possibly go and look for an organisation that will embrace your skills. But I think the future of organisations is that ability to harness the internal talent. Just as Juliette spoke about, getting alignment of vision and culture and those sorts of things in a startup, the larger organisations now, we are social beings, and we're seeing that as well through COVID. The technology is great. It's really enabling things like this to go ahead today virtually, and you can get a lot out of it. But at the same time, it is that face-to-face interaction. So I think organisations need to look at doing things differently, the way they communicate, but also the way they allow entrepreneurs to grow within them. And it is happening. It's just that oftentimes the mothership, the brand, the bureaucracy that makes a company very successful when it becomes a large company, is very incongruent with what a startup needs. So trying to mesh those two things together is a really big challenge for an organisation, and that's why they have difficulties doing it. But those that can do it well, great opportunity for people working for them, and great opportunities for your organisation. So I would say, if you're that way inclined, push hard. Just have that tenacity, and go about it the right way, and try and find an internal sponsor. Sometimes you might have to jump your immediate line manager or a couple up. Can be politically challenging sometimes, but hopefully not too much of a career limiting move for you. But just do it.
Great, I like that, Jason. Now, this next question's, I want to hear a bit from all three of you. How does building for social impact play into what you do? Rachel.
All right, so Powersphere is about the sustainability and how we can make energy accessible for everyone, and make especially renewable energy accessible for everyone. So I think there's there's this fulfillment you feel when you're making an impact to other people, and when this social impact comes into play, and when you have this big vision to impact the community. I think when you start achieving little milestones, like one at a time, you believe in your vision more and more, and you get more drive to pursue your vision. I guess that's a simple way to put it. So the social impact for Powersphere, for example, is to harness renewable energy in all areas around the world. So we're starting with urban areas on tall buildings where sun energy cannot be harnessed. So solar energy is not available due to the small roof space. So we're starting from there. And our vision for the future would be to help third world countries where they don't have electricity at all to implement these renewable wind turbines, for example. And that can be one of our future vision. And I think it really helps you personally to realize you're making a difference. So in the long term, you're helping someone overall. I think that's my take on the social impact. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Rachel. What about you, Juliette?
I think building social impact, your initial idea might actually change. So for example, in 2015, I realized that in a disaster, if I put my hand up and ask for 500 fridges or 5,000 mattresses or whatever's needed in that event, that I was actually, GiveIt was going to actually devastate the local economy and the local businesses in that area, which was really mortifying. So I put a memo to the board and the team and I said, look, I think in a disaster that we should only ask for cash and buy local, which it was actually probably, I might make GiveIt fail, because our point of difference in the marketplace was that we didn't ask for people for money. We asked for their microwave or their washing machine. Anyway, so we put it through and it was accepted from the bottom up to the very top in GiveIt. Everybody went, yes, we'll buy local. Let's make sure donations don't do any harm. And honestly, I sat with failure. I thought GiveIt was going to fail for months and months. Anyway, so we did that. We pushed that through, and then Cyclone Debbie hit. And if we had brought the donations into Airlie Beach, Dingo Beach, and that whole Proserpine region, we would have absolutely knocked out the local retailers. There is no doubt that the local, markers from Retrovision in Airlie Beach would have definitely have not survived the GiveIt onslaught. Anyway, so we changed the model, and so to build and make more social impact, but sometimes you might have to have risk of failure to do that. But I'm really passionate about supporting ideas that may fail but create more social impact, and that's how I build it. I just possibly failed, but social impact is why we're here, or why I'm here. Yeah, why GiveIt's here.
Thank you, Juliette. And Jason?
Look, the way I look at social impact is probably on a spectrum. 25 years ago when I started in business, social impact really wasn't a term that was coined. There was some of it happening, but I think we've certainly seen in the last 5 to 7 years that social impact has really become at the forefront of society and of businesses. Some do it well, some don't. What I would say is that those businesses, be it traditional businesses or new startups, if they're not starting to engage in the social impact conversation genuinely and start embracing it, they're going to struggle with their future in the next 5 to 10 years for a whole range of reasons. I think it's a good thing, number one, that we should all have some level of social impact, and every company will do it differently. Some such as Juliette's with GiveIt that's essentially what they're about. Others it's not, but it doesn't mean that they can't have a positive social impact in a number of ways. And traditionally it was done by just giving money. But I think now there's a whole lot of different ways. You can give your ideas, you can give leverage through product, and leverage through a whole lot of different ways. So like I say, I think social impact is a good thing. I think we're only going to see it become more and more immersed within companies. And attracting good quality employees now, whether they be of those coming out of school and university, millennials or older demographics, a lot of them now are becoming very socially aware and cause driven, and organisations that don't have a good social conscience will start to struggle to attract those people. So I guess that's how I see it. But I don't think it should be, for any leaders, I don't think social impact should be tokenism. And I think we're getting less and less of that. I think we're getting genuine social impact now by organisations that aren't formed totally for the purposes or the sole purpose of making social impact. So that's kind of my comments around that, Emily.
Great. And next one for you, Jason. What are you focused on right now?
What am I focused on? It's an interesting question. I suppose if I look at myself, I have and I continue to have a fairly portfolio career, so it's fairly diverse. the last 4 or 5 months has been quite interesting for me, because the majority of my time is spent with scaling up technology companies, primarily in the e-commerce space. So from a COVID perspective, we've actually had a really positive scrambling to kind of keep on top of everything demand. So that's been really interesting. I've got a number of board appointments outside the technology space, one with the Mater Hospitals Foundation, and then one with the Moreton Bay Colleges, and a foundation there. So those organisations have been impacted differently as a result of COVID. And certainly I've had to turn my mind to the issues that they're dealing with. So that's been interesting. I've had quite a broad perspective from COVID. And in terms of what else am I focusing on, I guess it's going to be interesting moving forward, because I think we were at such a rapid pace of being very global. That globalization in the main, I don't think is going to retreat as a result of COVID. And I think Juliette touched on it before. You know, we're social beings. We want to get back to being social, but the way in which we interact is going to be different. So I'm having all sorts of interesting, different conversations with the companies that I'm involved with. How do we capitalize on the demand at the moment? Because you know, for one of my companies, Bopple, which is the online order management for the hospitality space, you know, the demand is just exceeding what our internal capacity is. So how do we think differently? We can't just throw people at it at the moment. How else can we leverage? Neato, one of those other companies, you know, our retailers in the main have had massive increases in their online sales. But that is causing them problems. They've had supply problems of getting supply of product from Italy, from Europe, from China, etc. So yeah, I'm still probably thinking quite, I won't say randomly, but quite broadly in terms of these problems. And I think risks is one thing. You know, that would be my last point, because I do a fair bit of board work as well. It's the black swan events. You know, we've talked about that for a number of years now, black swan events happening, but I don't think on the risk register for most boards and for most companies, and I appreciate that smaller startups don't think about risk registers so much, but you know, whoever thought that COVID could have happened, a pandemic? Of course we thought a pandemic could have happened, but did we really think our governments would react the way they were and shut down the travel industry, for example? You know, what other black swan events could happen into the future? You know, I put it like a cyber attack. Many of us are hosting data in say an AWS server farm, a Microsoft Azure, a Google Cloud, or Alibaba or Alex, for more of the Asian Chinese side. You know, what happens if there is a major hack on multiple ones of those that they're brought down for weeks? You know, at the moment, life is still going on in this virtual environment, but can we imagine if one or more of those server farms were brought down either by a natural disaster, and you know, the likelihood of that is pretty remote because of the way they distribute and put everything in, but who knows, or by some cyber attack which brings them down. So I guess, without getting too distracted by it, you know, a lot of my mind has been thinking, well, hey, I think COVID was much worse in terms of the economic impact and the social impact than any of us ever predicted. So what else could there be that we need to do? Because, you know, I've been thankful that most of my businesses have had a positive experience this time. But, you know, I spent 15 years in the hotel and property industry. A number of years ago, before I got into the tech space, I was heavily invested in there, and boy, oh boy, you know, a lot of people, and it's just been decimated. And you would not have thought that could have happened, that hotels, pubs, clubs, and restaurants would be shut down for the length of time. You just wouldn't have thought it. So, yeah, a little bit. I've gone around in circles a little bit, but I suppose what I'm saying is, once again, if you want to be in the entrepreneurial space, you've got to have that ability to process large amounts of information, realize that sometimes you're going too deep and overthinking, but at least kind of be trying to put it all together to steer your path forward. Because there will always be obstacles, you know, in life, in business, and particularly as an entrepreneur going along your journeys, there will be these unknowns, and you've just got to watch out for those.
Can I share how I did my first risk management? As I told you, I had everyone in the world telling me that I was going to fail and what are you doing and it's not going to work. Anyway, I invited them all over, gave them some highlighters and a bucket of champagne and basically asked them, tell me all the ways in which I will fail and all the circumstances in which I will fail. And they had a hoot of a time. And that was my risk management plan, which has changed significantly. Can I tell you, it was a bit better written the last time at the last board meeting and the first board meeting. But, you know, if you need to work out your risks, listen to the people around you who have something negative to say. I actually think those no voters, the people around you that are trying to protect you, actually there's some gold in there, and listen to them. Listen to the no's, listen to the naysayers, because that's your risk management. And then you just mitigate against every single one of those things that they mention. Good
advice. Yeah, great.
With champagne's always good too, Jason.
Yeah, I think I've taken note of that next time.
Tasmanian bubbles work a treat too.
Okay, there we go.
Great, thanks. And Rachel, what about you? What are you focused on at the moment?
So what am I focused on at the moment? A lot of things. So I'm still a student, as you mentioned, in my third year of chemical engineering and biomedical science. So there's a lot of coursework going on. And so for me, Powersphere is my first startup company. And it's not my first, but one of my first tackle at trying to build something and apply it to the real world. So I still see all these things I'm doing as kind of an experiment, a test. So I'm just opening myself up to a lot more experience and explore my different abilities. So me as a student is probably different to Juliette and Jason, who've had that experience in the entrepreneurship journey. And for me, I'm just at my start. So I think for me as a student, I'm going to open myself up to more opportunities and just see what's out there and what I truly love and would like to do in the future. So Powersphere is definitely one of them, but just in this COVID situation, everyone is confused and I'm confused as well. So I'm spending this time to really think what is important to me and what I would like to do for the rest of my life, I guess. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Now, Jason, what do you wish you knew when you were starting out? What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Right, maybe I should have had some time to prepare and consider that one. Look, I think what I would say, and I probably touched on it a little bit earlier, but I did learn this, or I was told this by a mentor, an old boss early in my career, is that particularly for founders, it's often better to have a small part of a really big thing than a big part of a really small thing. Now, what I mean by that is, if you come up with the idea, you're the creative person, you're putting in the energy and all of those things, that's great. It's very, very rare that any entrepreneur, successful person in any field of endeavor, not just business, you know, be it sport, be it the arts, that you get there on your own. So what I'm saying though, particularly from founders, oftentimes they're hell-bent on having control at every stage. And I think that they need to learn that it would be good. They can leverage off other people and other people's investments by giving up something to get a bigger piece of the pie long term. And the other thing that I would say is what I've seen with a lot of founders as well, and you know, for myself along the journey, anybody that is an entrepreneur generally, you know, is close to the top of their game. They're a high achiever. They're an A-type personality generally. So, you know, they're a high achiever in any case. But what they've got to learn is that there's at a point as well, and this is not the ownership point, but this is the management of it, that to go to the next level, you've almost got to take a step back and not try to control and run everything yourself. So I think there gets a point in the journey. It's not when you first start out usually, but there becomes a point in the journey. If you want to break through to the next level, you have to be comfortable, because if you try to smother all of the people around you and keep thinking, then you won't get the best people on your team. They simply will leave you because they want to go and do it themselves. If you're going to employ people and bring them along the journey, you need to be able to create that culture and that environment where they can flourish and do what they do best, and don't try and think for them. So they're probably some of the insights that I would give. The last one is probably a saying, I guess, know when to hold them and when to fold them. A bit like the poker game, but the reality of it is sometimes there are things in your journey that you may be able to make wildly successful, but the amount of effort and time it takes, you're better off letting that go and moving on to something else. So I think that's probably one thing. Sometimes I've probably persisted too much on a particular path in life or a particular project because I was driven and wanted to make it successful. But the reality is I probably should have let it go and focused onto something else at that point in time. And that's hard to know. It's hard to do. It's a bit like the law of escalating commitment. The more you put into it, the more you keep investing. But yeah, that would be another world of words of wisdom, I suppose, I'd be telling my 20-year-old self.
Thanks, Jason. Now for you, Juliette, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I think mine would probably be more around the self-confidence. And I know I'm an extrovert, but the negative talk, oh my God, I am my worst enemy. I would be under a domestic violence order against myself. So you were talking, Jason, about the imposter syndrome of founders and founderitis and all that. Yeah, I've really struggled with mentally making sure that and confidence in decisions, because when you're a CEO, you're affecting the livelihoods of 27 staff and 50 volunteers, not to mention 305,000 charities, 3,000 whatever, the number keeps increasing. So every now and again, I've really struggled. So if I could go back to my 20-year-old self, I'd say just go with your gut, ask lots of advice, but if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. You know, I've been pushed into situations and I felt very uncomfortable about it, and I've done it because I didn't want to be rude, or, you know, HR, signing a contract but knowing, no, this is not right. I have 100% proven every single time I've gone against my gut that it's been a disaster. So 20-year-old self, Juliette, calm the farm and listen to your gut, because if it doesn't feel good, don't do it.
Yep.
Great, thanks, Juliette. So this is the last question for me, and then we'll get questions from the audience. Where do you think the biggest opportunities are for emerging entrepreneurs? So I'll get a response from all of you. So Jason.
Yeah, look, I think health tech. I think health tech is a big emerging area. Things such as the Google toilet, for any of you who have heard about that, I think it's really exciting. But there's a whole lot of areas in health tech. I think also in the financial space as well. I think, it's been something there where there's a lot of opportunity still in the financial space to be disrupted. A lot of the industries that haven't, the insurance industries and those, we're starting to see it, but we still haven't sort of seen the disruption. And I think in data, I think in data analytics, the amount of data that's out there, there's been a lot coming around that side of things, but I think huge. And cybersecurity. So that would be my fourth pick. Is cybersecurity is a sleeping time bomb, and an area that what's happening with cybersecurity is that there are a lot of very well-intentioned but experience lack of experience. So a lot of people in positions of influence that are making IT decisions, pushing through hard to get tech in at any cost, but they don't understand the implications and they're not asking the right questions. So if I was looking for startup entrepreneurial opportunities, cybersecurity I'd be looking at. I'd be looking at the data analytics side of things, and I'd certainly be looking at health and continuing to look in the fintech space. Lots of other opportunities out there too. Don't I think the social enterprise, but I'll let Juliette cover that side of things. But they would be my 4 picks.
Great, thanks, Jason. And yes, Juliette, what do you think?
I think the cybersecurity is critical, but from a personal point of view, I think that there's a lot of exploration in terms of protecting our personal privacy and the privacy of our ideas and the privacy of our family. Because at the moment, I'm kind of relaxed about it, but I start talking to a friend about donuts and then suddenly donuts come on my Instagram feed. What is going on? So so simple stuff is making me more and more uncomfortable in that space. I also think that the pressures on the planet in terms of the latest report is that in the next 20 years, it will be irreversible, the damage that we have done. And so any solution there in terms of any of the impacts of coal, oil, I know that there's a lot of people really heavily invested in this, but it's not happening fast enough and we need more ideas. And I'm looking up the Google toilet the moment I get off this call. So health is definitely, there are so many diseases that are not solved, like, Parkinson's disease and things like that as well. So health is a big one. And, the limbs, I know that they're quite ahead in that. But as I said before, I see what makes you angry that it's not just, what makes you upset that it's not fixed. That's an area of innovation. That's your area of innovation that you probably can work on for the next 20 years of your life.
Thanks, Juliette. And you, Rachel, what do you think?
I think the 2 major fields that I think have huge potential are drug design. So, for example, in the health industry, people are living longer than ever, and it's increasing, which is fantastic. But this also calls for more need in drugs and treatments for especially rare diseases, as well as some common ones that are only that cannot be cured but only coped with. So those treatments are definitely have a big potential. So anything in drug design, biotechnology, all those fields, as well as renewable energy, I think, or renewables in general, because we're doing so much damage to our planet, we should really focus our energy and money on, like Powersphere, to maybe help reduce or even stop as our final goal to stop global warming and all this damage we've done to our planet. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. So while we're waiting for questions to come through from our audience, hang on, we've got one question here. I think to all panelists, how would you most focus in business analysis when you decide to expand your business?
I mean, maybe I'll start talking about it. I must say I'm not entirely clear on the question, so maybe it can be clarified a little bit as I start talking and the others think about it and get some clarification. Look, focus and alignment, and Juliette touched on it earlier, is absolutely critical. Having a really clear vision and making sure that anybody that joins your team has that clear vision is critically important. There are lots of tools out there. The OKRs, for any of you that have looked up or want to have a look at the OKRs, it's a model used by a lot of tech companies Certainly Google, there's a number of webinars or TEDx talks on OKRs. So I think they are very good. I find them good for having organizational alignment and departmental alignment and individual alignment. Salesforce, another global tech company, does it called the V2 MUM, talks about vision to mission obstacles. So that's another one you could research. So I think that's really good in terms of getting focus for individuals and people within the organization. The other point that I would touch on is the data side of things. Problems that I've encountered, particularly with growing organizations, the more data you get, the more you can get the wrong decisions. And I'm continually surprised by the fact that we have the data, but what we're extracting out, we're not asking the right questions, or we're not understanding it. Now a really quick and situation we had with Nido some time ago is one of the metrics we measure is our gross merchant value. So we have sort of 3 billion plus turning through the Nido platform. There was at a point in time there where that was growing over a 3-month period. It was kind of growing 20% month on month, which was much more than at normal. And we thought, great, we've just hit it. We've hit this hockey stick growth. Everything's going well. After 3 months of starting to dive deeper and say, it can't be right, and those who were producing the reports were saying, no, it's definitely right, we realized that we'd signed up a couple of customers in an overseas currency. And I think it might have been the Libyan or Lira currency. You know, it was 1,000 to 1 kind of thing. So the point is that was giving a whole spike, but we were starting to make business decisions and giving ourselves inflated confidence on data, but it was incorrectly reporting data. So back to that question of alignment and everything, or analysing your business. When you are expanding your business, you've got to know the numbers. You absolutely have to start knowing the numbers. I think early in your business, I wouldn't worry so much about metrics and that it's overrated. You've got to get a product market fit, and you've got to get market traction and going. Of course, you've got to look at your profit and loss and a budget, but as you get bigger, you need alignment of the numbers, and you need to make sure that the numbers that are being presented are very accurate, because you're making business decisions on them. And it's easy because it's happened to me where you've got numbers you're reporting, but you're making the wrong decision because you've got the wrong numbers. So don't underestimate or overestimate the importance of getting the right data. Hopefully that's helped.
That's great. Thanks, Jason. Another question from the audience. How did you network once you decided that you wanted to pursue a specific idea and develop your ideas to grow it and get others to believe in your idea? Maybe Juliette.
So when I had the idea, I spoke about it with a number of people, but I built the Give It website before I had any kind of people thinking what I was doing was sane. And then once I had built it, I basically went to the smartest people in my world. So I had a mate who was a head accountant at PwC. I had a brand guy who was brand genius. I had a property developer entrepreneur who a real risk taker. You know, so I had transactional people around me, but I also had transformational people around me, but they were the best in their field. And then I started a committee and I reported into them. Now, obviously that's now called a board, now that, you know, Give It's had a board for 10 years now. But those initial days, I surrounded myself with smarter people than me, because I'm not a good accountant and I am not a good at brand and I'm not good at communications. And so you convince them to help you, and you also you keep them engaged, and you do what they say as well. So, you know, you don't go to a committee, get all their ideas and come back in 8 weeks' time and do nothing. You actually need to trust them. Otherwise, getting someone else on the committee or the board to support you, that, you know, that really supports your idea and helps you grow it.
Great. And what about you, Rachel? How did you go about growing your network?
Right. So when I first started Powersphere, I had no really smart people like Juliette had in my life. I was this 18-year-old. And when I came into ilab, the mentor told everyone to go out to events and just network. No matter where you go, just do it and see what it's like. And that was really scary for me at the start, because I thought I had no social skills as an engineer. I prefer staying at home and just work on my project. So I looked up a few YouTube videos on how to network at an event, and that kind of helped. So I went out to a few networking events and I followed those instructions. Those instructions were like really basic instructions, like smile at people and talk about your business with confidence and all those things. I'm sure anyone can just look up on YouTube how to network at an event and get those answers. But I did those things, and surprisingly, it wasn't that hard. No one responded to my networking attempt badly. So that was quite encouraging. And so getting into the mindset that everyone else at a networking event, they're trying to network. So if you go there to network, that's completely normal and that's what you do there. So just believing in yourself and trying it and knowing that it doesn't really hurt you is gonna help. Just take the first step and yeah, grow yourself from there.
I really like that, Rachel. Great, thanks. So we've got another question here, and I'd like to hear from all of you. What are some mistakes you wish you could have avoided?
I'm happy to start. I think one mistake that is often happens, and it certainly happened to us in our Nido business, is that we went too broad in our product in the early years. What happens when you go broad is a few things. From a technology perspective, it means that you've got development teams that can't be focused on the core problem that you're solving for. So they're off working on too many different areas. All things to all people. They're actually not doing a particularly good job, and you're not becoming best in class and building the features that are really important to your customers because you're too broad. And from a marketing point of view, you start to attract the wrong customers. So we were on a journey of just getting customer signups, thinking that was important. But what happened is we started getting these customers on. They weren't really suited the right customer for our platform, many of them. It was costing us more time and effort to service those customers. And we were starting to get negative reviews from those customers because they weren't enjoying the experience they were having, but they weren't our ideal customers. So it affects both the front of house and the back of house if you go too broad. The other thing that I wish we did, once again, I'll come back to the Nido experience, is I wished we'd gotten a more diverse and larger board of advisors early on. I think our thinking was too narrow and too insular by not having other people outside our organisation invited to some kind of a board of advisors that could open doors, challenge the way we were thinking about growing the business, challenge the way we were thinking about when we got the finance, and potentially challenging about some of the decisions around some of the hires and the product focus. So that would be two mistakes that I wish I had avoided and think we could be further ahead in the journey if we hadn't made them.
Great, thanks, Jason. And Juliette?
I completely agree with that. Going too broad too fast. So after the 2011 flood, Cyclone Yasi, I went national, and I regret that. I think that we rebuilt the website, and as much as the capacity should have been national, but the actual GiveIt operations should have just been Queensland. Going too broad. Another thing is Australia is just so diverse. And Western Australia is like a different country in attitude. Victorians, God bless them, but they function differently as well. We are far north Queensland. That's a challenge, just getting charities to sign on there. So, and if we had really focused all of the volunteers just on Queensland. So what I did is I put one on WA, one on Victoria, one on South Australia, and it was really hard for 2 years. Hard to, and so I regret that. So if I could go back in time, I wouldn't go too broad. Australia's too big for that. Australia's way too big to go broad fast.
Can I add to that question, Juliette? So was there implications to your long-term growth by having grown too fast rather than focusing first on Queensland?
Yeah, look, it's hard to work out whether the concept was always like holding onto a rocket, because the concept went, you know, it's been always growing too fast, or is that because I am an impatient soul by nature? So I think I'm a big part of the problem there. So what was the question again, Emily? I just went into my negative.
Was it like one step forward, two steps back by trying to go too far, too fast?
Yeah, it was. It would have been good for funding to actually just go Queensland as well, because I could have got the model absolutely perfect and then could have gone to the New South Wales government saying this is what you can have. And then I, you know, as we are now doing with our disaster recovery service, it stretched the volunteers too much, and it stretched our capacity, particularly at Christmas time when there's a surge in needs. The charities that were coming on were all had different needs, similar to Jason's business. So it definitely would have, would have probably had more of a national presence now had I have not grown too fast.
Interesting. Thanks for that, Juliette. And Rachel, what mistake do you wish you could have avoided?
Firstly, I'd just like to say we're going to make mistakes. Everyone's going to make mistakes. And I believe making mistakes kind of helps me grow as a person, and all those experiences build to my character. So I think avoiding mistakes might not be the best way to think about it, but the way I think about it is how to make mistakes and learn from it and don't make that again. So while some mistakes as a startup I made was not focus my energy and resources on all aspects of the company. Instead, I would focus on the technology and spend all my energy and my co-founder just investigate how to fix this one little problem in our turbine and not worry about the financial projection and the marketing and all those other things. And then we'll realize we have this fantastic device, but how are we going to market it? What's our business model? All those things. So we have, as a startup, we have limited time and resources, but it takes an awful amount of planning to manage the resources and the time. So I would recommend spending more time planning and just know what you, just talk to people and know what you don't know. So you kind of make time for that and not have that hit you in the head later down the track. Yeah.
Great. Our next question. Is there a situation where you would give up an idea, and what is the main reason that you would do that?
I can start with this one. So giving up ideas, that's going to happen constantly. As entrepreneurs, ideas kind of form constantly, and you think, oh, why not try this? If we add this feature to our product, it'll be good for this or this market, but that's not always going to be feasible. So one thing that contributes to throwing out an idea would be the market research. If the market research doesn't support what your hypothesis was, you should stop spending time and energy on that. And also don't make too much of a pivot from your initial vision, because you had all that solid work and market research and all those time spent on building your initial idea. If something sidetracks you, I think it's best to get your foundations right before you start building on this little side ideas. So yeah, so I think feedback from other people and the market research are the reasons why a company would give up on the idea.
I also surrounded myself with board members that told me no without feeling guilty. So I would go, oh, I've got a great idea, and they'd be like, no. So you might need a few of them if you keep on coming up with ideas.
Look, I think by nature, and we started off this conversation talking about entrepreneurs, what does it mean, etc. By nature, most entrepreneurs, most CEOs and founders will have just a plethora of ideas, and they'll come up at 3 o'clock in the morning and all sorts of things. But the really successful ones are the ones that can double down and focus and not get distracted by those. So I think, yes, sometimes there is a need to pivot. You know, I think there's absolutely a need to pivot, particularly now because industry is just changing so quickly, and there are so many new ideas constantly coming out. So sometimes you can go, you know, you would want to change and give up on an idea because you know the headwinds are going to be too strong. Doesn't mean that you don't keep going, but you take a different direction and step around it. So I think pivoting is important, or the ability to pivot. And I think the ability to focus. The other thing that you might want to give up on ideas sometimes is if you start to think through what the go-to-market strategy is going to look like and what money it is potentially going to take to get to market. You know, sometimes you might want to go, hey, is this something I want to go after? Particularly if there is a risk. And I do think this risk is often overinflated. I've been there, done that. But I think Juliette touched on it earlier, is your ideas of other people entering the market. Can somebody else flip their model and come in on top of what you've got? Now, oftentimes that doesn't happen, believe it or not. It does happen from time to time. People steal people's ideas and they come in. But it doesn't happen every time. But certainly another reason you might want to give up on an idea is if you think that the risks that someone else can flip their model or move into your space and be much more successful, and you don't see it's a space where there's an opportunity for many participants, you might want to think about it. So that they're probably the extra points that I would add into that consideration.
Great, thanks everyone. Next question. Can you talk about your experience when you started talking with investors? Who would that be, Jason? Have you had to talk to investors?
Yeah, look, I'm happy. I mean, I've got a few points to say there. I think it is actually a really important. I think investors. Well, I started touching on it earlier and said that I think it's better to have a small piece of a large pie. But I also find that too many founders come talking to me and they say, oh, I'm seeking investment. And I go, why? You know, if you can become self-funding and bootstrap it, that's the best way. Don't go and sell or take on investment unless you need to. So I'd make that point. I'll make the point that not all money is good money. And what I mean by that is you want investors that are generally in your space, because if they're not, they can be quite challenging to bring along for the journey. It can take a lot of time. And as well as the money, you actually want them opening doors for channel partnerships. You want them opening the doors to bring along other investors. You want them opening the doors to bring along good boards, customers, strategic customers. So some investors can actually come with all of that. Others come with just the money. And I think I would prefer to have an investor that has the money and those other things. Another situation I've experienced in one of my companies is, you know, happy to kind of talk about that one fairly publicly, is, you know, it's been a challenge for us at points in time with Nido when we had a major strategic listed company, being Telstra, invested in us. It was a challenge talking to some of the US VCs and the likes because they loved our company. They desperately wanted to invest, but they wouldn't invest alongside a strategic investor that had a controlling interest or the ability to have a controlling interest. And if that investor doesn't want to be diluted, you can actually lose investors. So you need to be very careful who you take on board, because some investors can block the desire for other investors to come along. So yeah, they're probably the key tips or takeaways that I would say when going out to raise money. I mean, don't feel you need to. If if you can bootstrap it, you're not a failure because you've built it yourself and haven't taken on investors. So, yeah.
I think an important thing to note at this point in terms of funding is that there's always going to be a part, particularly for some, whether they go not for profit or for profit. And when I do mentoring, I actually urge people to go for profit and go for the investor route rather than the not for profit most of the time. But I agree with Jason. What you said is that if you take on a stakeholder, make sure that they don't alienate other stakeholders. So confidentially, give it is widely known to be supported by IAG. But IAG, the biggest insurance company in New Zealand and Australia, they have a lot of competitors, and some of them are Suncorp Insurance and RACQ in Queensland, which just happen to be the biggest, people in, companies working in the disaster space in Queensland. So as much as it was a significant investment in the early days and it was too difficult to say no to, it actually alienated other stakeholders and contributors coming on board. But obviously I represent the not-for-profit sector here, but always just have another think, can you do it without becoming a not-for-profit? Can you be a social enterprise and can you make it a for-profit? Because a not-for-profit's all great, but I've worked 12 years and probably worked 20 years on Give It, and I'll have absolutely nothing to show at the end of it. And if you are working really hard on your idea, why not actually make a profit? And with that profit, you can change the world. So just have a think about that. Don't always go the easy route and become a charity.
Great, thanks. Rachel, have you spoken to investors yourself?
Yeah, so I think Jason and Julia covered it pretty well. I'd like to add from a startup perspective, first, talking to an investor can be quite challenging, especially when you aren't from a business background. I think talking to a lot of experienced people who can mentor you first before you approach investors can stop you from making some of the mistakes that you can avoid. So having mentors that you trust to talk to before you approach investors is quite important. And secondly, just understand that there are going to be things you don't know and you don't know what you don't know. So be ready to accept different suggestions, but still stand up for what you believe in and your company value. Don't let the investor push too much, but also be open to different opportunities. Yeah.
Great. So this might be a couple of final questions. We've got 7 minutes left. So do you have any tips to help young entrepreneurs to gain credibility and be taken seriously? Who'd like to start?
Yes, I think that getting a committee around you and in your scope actually writing who they are, because people who support you give you credibility, particularly if the idea is new. Obviously, like Rachel, if you win awards and multiple awards like Rachel keeps on doing, I'm more likely to invest in your next project because you are putting yourself out there and you have the ability to promote it and share it with people. So winning an award's not just about the idea, but the building a case for support around it and promoting it to, and congratulations on all your success, Rachel.
Thank you so much.
And then also, your personal awards. So I recall in 2015, I was awarded Australia's Local Hero as a part of the Australia Day Awards. And I honestly think that the awards that you receive on that level give you credibility. Now, I'm not saying everybody should nominate themselves for an Australian of the Year award, but I'm saying if those awards and building that community of support around you with those types of things is definitely going to help significantly with credibility and being taken seriously. So put serious people around you and apply for awards and grants and prizes.
Yeah, I'll add on that. So prizes and awards don't just come to you. You have to seek them and enroll, like participate in them. So all these challenges by the uni or other or ventures activities, all these things can build your credibility. So me as a young emerging entrepreneur, the question describes, I find myself contemplating how to make myself more credible and how to get people to take me seriously. And the longer I contemplate that, then I realize that all those people out there who are successful and established, they've taken their time and they've put their time into what they believe in, and that's what makes them so respectful and successful. And as anyone young, you should humble yourself and know that you're not there yet, but you're on your way. Just knowing that is quite encouraging. So that's the way I like to think about it, instead of just being too hurried into becoming credible. Spend your time and people will see your effort and just the journey you've come through. I think that's quite important. And being able to tell your story and say market it in a way, I wouldn't say market for a lack of better word. So how to tell it in a way that people can understand your journey and be kind of feel that they're a part of it is quite important for someone young like me.
Thanks, Rachel. Jason, yes.
Yeah, look, I really enjoyed that conversation. I think Juliette and Rachel raised some really good, valid points. The only things I would add to it, or was going to add to it, is you'll definitely get credibility if you know your numbers, if you know your industry, and you know your competitors. So in addition, I think the conversation was more important that Rachel and Juliette entered into. But I think as a founder, just make sure when you're having conversations with people, you really know your numbers, you know your industry, and you know your competitors. And I say that because I've seen both sides of it. I've seen founders that do, and they just come across so much more confidently and credible. I know founders that have a great idea. They don't have to be a good public speaker at all, but they just struggle to articulate, or they struggle to really know the numbers inside their company, what they're doing, the metrics. They struggle to kind of get a grasp on what competitors are doing and how the space is moving. So that's what I mean. Really, that adds to credibility. In addition to the points of awards and the other areas that Rachel and Juliette spoke about, that also really adds to it. Yep.
I agree. It's like someone can come up to you with a really great idea, but they're so in it that you're going, you've missed that there's so many competitors and that idea's actually been done. You know, they're so in it, and obviously that the idea is perfect in itself, but it's not relational. They're not seeking outwards. Jason, that's great as well. You do need to know your competitors, and you do really need to know your numbers.
And don't jump to conclusions. Don't think that you actually have to go and write some code from scratch to implement your idea. There may actually be other platforms and pieces of tech out there that you can put together and create a fantastic platform and idea. So I think, some of them just go too quickly. And this is back into probably a mistake more than credibility. But to pick up on what Juliette said, there is, I think, some race in tunnel visioned and think they've got a great idea and I've got to build tech and I've got to get a tech partner and I've got to do this. Yeah, there'll be some tech involved, but it's not actually starting to cut code. And build back of house code. Sometimes, platforms such as Microsoft or whatever have put some great pieces of tech that you can build them together and deploy the solution. So just don't be too tunnel visioned in trying to solve your problem.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, Jason. So a good way to know your numbers and show you know your numbers is to have a little pitches written already. So when you meet certain people, you know what you're going to say and you have it memorized. You can just say, this is the market and this is my competitors, and just show that you know your stuff. So having everything pre-written is quite helpful to avoid being put on the spot and losing credibility.
I also think a good story that illustrates your idea and how it will work in the marketplace is really valuable as well. So a hearty, effective story that demonstrates the best case scenario of how this will be implemented in your world or in the community or in whatever area you're doing, because then that grasps the emotional, the intellectual and emotional E&IQ. So people go, oh, I get it. So that works for me. If you ever want me to be your mentor, you have to tell me a story.
Over with some champagne.
Yeah, and not fuzzy which brand, but lots of highlighters as well. I'm so visual that I need. Fascinating. This has been great.
It's been a lot of fun. So I'll have to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining us today at our Wednesday lunchtime event. And for all our participants, we do have special guests at Community Wednesdays every month. So feel free to keep looking on our Ventures website to see what events are coming up. Thank you so much, Jason, Rachel, Juliette. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Bye, everyone. All the best.
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.